All right, so Destiny, today we're going to talk about a topic that I've wondered about for a long time. I know a lot of people do, which is the topic of hell and its duration. Is it forever? Is it like conscious, eternal torment?
Yep.
Is there annihilation at some point? You just like cease to be. Is there an escape hatch at some point? You can say, "Okay, I'm sorry," and
yeah, I did my time.
Exactly. And I'm going to repent now. And Christians through the ages have had actually different views on this. And everybody kind of comes armed for bear with their like big biblical case for it. Mm-hmm. The book of Revelation, chapter 14, is one of those places in the Bible that talks about the torture, the torment of those who do not follow the Lamb, Jesus, but who actually are shaped and adore the systems of the world and adore the anti-gods. And it's pretty blunt about like, it will not go well for you like forever. But the thing is, in my experience, most Christians are like wanting the up or down answer. But you cannot get there until you understand the broader context about how does judgment work? What is God's concern for justice? It's ultimately a matter of the created order and the alignment or misalignment that humans have with that deep layer of reality.
You know, I actually appreciate that you're foregrounding this to start. When we have this conversation, I find, especially with those outside the faith who are curious but have some hangups, especially about hell, the issue often lies in why would God act this way? Why would God send, that's kind of the language, why would God send someone to hell?
Right.
But I think what Revelation helps us do is it foregrounds the type of person that experiences this torment. And something you highlighted, I felt was really appropriate and apt, which was that these are people who delight in anti-God activity, which ultimately is anti-human activity, anti-flourishing activity, anti-creative activity. And we'll probably get deeper into this further into the episode, but I feel like that's really helpful to start the conversation out because oftentimes we like to turn and point the finger at God when this is a conversation that involves a human response to God.
Right.
And then we look at what justice comes because of that response to God. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. So, man, there's so much to say about this, but we're gonna try to do the work of seeing the context. So we're in Revelation 14.
Yeah, let's do that.
We're gonna go kind of verse by verse. In chapter 13, if you recall, we got like the 666. Ron Herms walked us through that. He's an expert in this stuff and showed pretty, convincingly that in the first century, 666, everybody understood, wink, wink, this is pointing to Nero. And not just to Nero the man, but to the broader, the systems, the imperial rhetoric, the idolatrous demands of this whole system. And we met a dragon and then two monsters, and they're all sort of part of this system of lies and injustice. And from the capital city in Rome down to the local levels and the local shrines and the local temples. So that's been going on. And then now in chapter 14, there's like three scenes. And the way John signals this to us is he'll say, then I looked and saw, then I turned and saw. And it's kind of like our scene change cue.
Yep.
So there's three scenes here. And so let's just take it line by line. Okay, so John says, verse 14:1, as I watched, there was the lamb. And remember, this is a lamb who looks like it's dead and yet is still alive. This lamb is standing on Mount Zion. Now, Mount Zion, that's where Jerusalem is. Right. Remember, the book of Revelation ends in the New Jerusalem, so it seems to be kind of gesturing forward there.
Okay.
But one of the scriptures from the Old Testament that meant a lot to the early Christians is Psalm chapter 2. And there, it's a messianic psalm. Right. God says, I have set my king on Mount Zion. And although the nations rage and everybody's plotting and they're all going crazy, but verse 4 is one of my favorite verses. He who sits in the heavens laughs. God's like, LOL, I'm not concerned because I've put my king on Mount Zion. Mm-hmm. And so
How funny though. I think about like if we were, if this were a movie, this majestic, panning over to the animal on the top of like cresting the mountain, and it's a bloody lamb.
Right.
Not quite the pinnacle of strength.
Exactly.
But we've talked about this before. I mean, that's the point.
Right.
I have set my king on the mountain.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
This bloodied lamb who's given itself up.
Right. There's a little, this is an idiosyncratic interpretation I have, but in Hebrew, there it says, Nasachti Malki al Hartzion. I have, and it's usually appointed. Mm-hmm. The word, it Nasach, as a Hebrew root, can mean, it can be taken in different directions. One is Nasich, which means prince.
Okay.
But it also is a word that can mean like to pour out. And so pour out libations, pour out fluid. And, when the New Testament talks about Jesus emptying himself, pouring himself out, into my mind, there's this sort of you can bring these two ideas together that the great heavenly prince is also the one who pours himself out. Mm-hmm. He is the lamb who's got blood pouring out of him. Mm-hmm. And yet, precisely because of that, not in spite of it, because of it, he is the one installed on Mount Zion as the true Lord.
Yep.
And so that sort of paradox of you got to be empty to be full, you got to die to be crowned. Yep. That goes throughout the scriptures. Christians aren't making this up.
Yep.
It's all through the Hebrew scriptures.
Yeah, this is over and over and over.
So he's bringing us back to this classic image, which he's also repurposed around Jesus. And then it says, next line, and with him were 144,000. Mm-hmm. Now, we've already met these 144,000 in chapter 7.
Right.
And they're presented almost like a military census.
Yep.
12,000 from each tribe of Israel.
Which is kind of like a callback to Numbers.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's sort of, this idea that there's a remnant, there's this idealized people of God, and they're a subset of all of Israel. Mm. And yet in chapter 7, we get the same dialectic that we saw with the lion and the lamb, where John hears a lion and then he sees the lamb.
Right.
In chapter 7, he sees the 144,000, or I think he hears them.
Right.
But then he turns and he sees an international multitude that no one could count.
Right.
And so the symbol, 144,000, points to a reality that's actually beyond it. Mm-hmm. And interesting, let me just read the next line. These 144,000 who had his name and the name of his father written on their foreheads. Mm-hmm. And back in chapter 7, these 144,000 are sealed. Right. We did a whole episode on this, how everybody gets a mark.
Everyone gets a mark.
Now this contrasts with at the end of chapter 13, where on the right hands and on the foreheads of the people who follow and worship the monster, they're getting the mark of the beast. Yes. Mm-hmm. And so this is like standard apocalyptic language where there's sort of like the sons of light versus the sons of darkness. You're in one camp or the other. Yeah. Everybody's marked. Yeah. And so here at the beginning of chapter 14, we get people with one mark on their forehead that stand in opposition to the people who have the other mark on their forehead just a few verses prior.
Right. And I'm curious to know if this is also like, does this have any Exodus themes involved, or is this more kind of akin to, well, I guess we're going to get further ahead. Let's read verse 2 and then we can talk more.
Sure. There's definite Exodus themes in the background of this whole book. And we will get to some of those, I think, today. For sure. Okay. All right. So verse 2, you want to read verse 2 for us?
Sure. I heard a voice from heaven, like the sound of many waters, like the sound of mighty thunder. And the voice I heard was like harpists playing on their harps.
Yeah, I love this. It's just like, I have these big headphones and they have like the bass, you can turn them up. Mm-hmm. And it just like makes me think of this like sensory auditory experience where it's just like boom.
I can't even imagine. Yeah. When you're at a concert and
yeah, exactly. The subwoofers are just like shaking you.
You can literally feel in every cell of your body the vibration from the sound. It's crazy.
Right. It's like major thunder next to a major waterfall next to a world-class symphony. Yeah. Like it's just like
glory.
Yeah. Glory. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It gets your attention.
Well, and this part's interesting to me. In verse 3, it says, and they're singing a new song before the throne and before the four creatures and the elders. nobody can learn that song except for the 144,000 who have been redeemed from the earth.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of, a couple things. So singing a new song, what's the point of singing a new song? Like that's a big question for me. It's like, okay, nice.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. So
it's a brand new song. Congrats.
No, so I thought about that. So in Psalm, so we're going to see in this passage, it's about God's judgment on the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And yet that judgment is framed as actually great news. It's a reason to worship.
Mm-hmm.
Now that idea, which is counterintuitive, appears a lot in the Old Testament. In Psalm 96 and Psalm 98, both those Psalms begin, sing a new song to the Lord, a new song. And by the end, at the last of both of those, all of creation is rejoicing because God comes to judge the earth. And so I think this idea of singing a new song is
it's like a cue.
Yeah, if your ears are biblically tuned to like, wait a minute, there's a lot of our worship songs that say sing a new song, and then it talks about God's judgment on all the peoples of the earth being fantastic news. That cues us for where this is going. Now these elders, they're singing before the elders. These elders are themselves musicians, and they themselves are songwriters. We saw this back in chapters 4 and 5.
Right.
So this is, and this for me, I always go here, but for me, like the brain on music has an access to reality that it often otherwise doesn't. So for me, like at a sort of a epistemological level, the idea that the presence of God is a musical experience makes fantastic sense, at least given our own equipment for doing our best to understand reality.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that.
So
go ahead. Following up on that, I think on the heels of that question for me is earlier in the book, and I'm not sure if these two things relate, but this is what it makes me think of. Earlier on in the book, John is grieved by the fact that nobody can open the scroll. There's only only one person is allowed to open the scroll, and it's the Lamb.
Yeah.
Or capable of doing it. And he was, grieved by that. And now it's kind of using similar language. I don't know if that's just our English translations kind of making it sound similar, but it says nobody can learn the song except for the 144,000. I just thought that was interesting. It's kind of this like exclusivity. Like, what's the point of that?
I don't know.
That's okay.
Honestly,
I thought that was so interesting. I was just like, why only the 144,000? Like, what's the point of only them being able to learn the song?
I think if I'm reading this correctly, the 144,000 might be the same people who, in the next chapter 15, who've won the victory over the monster. And then there's a song, by the way, that follows. Like it breaks into poetry. But these seem to be the martyrs. And so there seems to be this idea, just like the Lamb who has died.
Oh, yes.
Is the only one able to open the scroll. Maybe those martyrs who've actually put their blood where their mouth is are uniquely able to understand a certain dimension. That's a guess.
But it resonates well with everything that we've discussed. And I think it resonates well with the idea that it's not so much about like, we can learn it and you can't. It's more this like...
We're on the worship team. You didn't make the cut.
Exactly.
Because church never does that.
No, right, yeah, exactly. No, but it really feels like you put your finger on it, that this is less about like kind of a neener thing and more like... we have laid our lives down and we're able to, it's almost like when you go through something or experience something or do something that's produced something in you or that's caused you to earn something that like other people don't quite understand.
Oh yeah.
They probably can't sing it because they're not laying their lives down for that. They've not been through suffering to the other side. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. That's what like a college degree is. What does that piece of paper on the wall mean? It means I suffered. I went through every exam week. I wrote every final paper. I showed up to all the things. Yeah. It's not just a piece of paper. It shows that I went through that intensive narrowing of apprenticeship that has qualified me to now speak at a different level. I can understand these things at a different level because I've gone through that.
Yep.
That's the idea.
And that's exactly what I feel like is likely happening here.
But it also always must be remembered, the symbolic nature of this 144,000, because per chapter 7, they signal a countless multitude. So it's not like there's this pure, and I think the Jehovah's Witnesses are pretty big on this, or some people like really fixate on this 144,000 thing without understanding how it works symbolically in the book. Yeah.
Totally. That's fair.
Yeah.
All right, verse 4. You want to read it?
Go for it.
All right. These are the ones who have never polluted themselves with women. They are celibate. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They have been redeemed from the human race as first fruits for God and the Lamb, and no lie has been found in their mouths. They are without blemish.
Yeah, so several things here. Let's talk about they've never polluted themselves with women. They are celibate.
Yeah.
So
that sounded, not gonna lie, that sounded kind of rough. I was like, dang. In one sense, you're like, okay, geez, like for those of us that are like married or like, you're just like, well, didn't make the cut.
Never going to learn that song. I'm polluted. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So is this, in my mind, this is probably a hyperlink to something?
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a passage in Deuteronomy 23 who talks about when you're going to battle, you need to like if you had like a wet dream or something like that, you need to like clean yourself and like stay away.
Right.
But there's two passages in the story of David that are interesting. I wrote it down. In 1 Samuel 21, David's on the run and he goes to the priest and he says, "I'm starving. Do you have anything to eat here?" And they say, "Well, we only have the holy bread." Right. Actually, let me read the passage. So this is 1 Samuel 21.
And he ends up taking it, right?
Yeah. So the priest says, "Well, I have no common bread on hand." I'm in 1 Samuel 24, verse 4. "No common bread, but there is holy bread if the young men have kept themselves from women." And David answered the priest, "Truly women have been kept from us as always when I go on an expedition. The vessels of the young men are holy. Even when it is an ordinary journey, how much more today will their vessels be holy?" So the priest gave him the holy bread. No. So the idea is, if we're going to go into battle, like I knew the guys, I knew guys on my high school basketball team who were like, "I cannot make out with my girlfriend before a game."
Oh yeah, it's a distraction, right?
It will distract. It will sap my energy. It will. I will not be as potent.
Yep.
So there's that idea. So it's not a sort of like a blanket no on like sex is dirty and that disqualifies you, or it's a lower grade human.
Right.
It is military term for short term. Another example of this is later on in the affair with Bathsheba. David gets her pregnant, tries to bring her husband home and make it look like he did it.
Yes.
But he says, "I'm not going to go sleep with my wife. I'm in war. I will not do that."
Sleeps on the front porch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's the whole idea is in a time of war, it is not,
this is
sexual intimacy is not a thing. Yeah, exactly.
This is best practice.
So it seems to be, the scholars that I've read seem to say that when it says they've never polluted themselves with women, they're celibate, this is picking up still on the military imagery of 144,000 as the elite troops, the shock troops.
Yeah.
But it's not a wider comment on the good or evil of sexuality.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
No, that totally makes sense. And it maps on well to the militaristic theme here. It also just makes sense because it's kind of this like amplifying, like, right? These almost seem like perfect people, right? It's this idea that like their faithfulness is amplified, right?
Yeah.
Like they're focused on the task, which is to be faithful to the Lamb,
right? And
to follow him wherever he goes, and right, like they're dialed in. I don't know how else to say that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And a lot of people do fixate on sexual morality as like the issue,
sure,
and it's important, but there are other issues that their ideal status is fleshed out more. Arguably much more in the statement, they follow the Lamb wherever he goes.
Yeah.
That is essentially what it means to be a Christian. Jesus goes around the Sea of Galilee and says, "Follow me, you follow me, follow me." And, it's the shock value of the image we've lost because usually lambs follow someone else, but now the shepherd is a lamb. I was hiking one time in the desert in the south of Israel, and it was the weirdest.
Casually, as one does.
When you live there, when you live there, you're like, "I'm going to go hiking."
Yeah.
And so it was there. I shared the trail one afternoon with these two Bedouin teenage boys, and these kids are like 14. Yeah. They both have semi-automatic machine guns.
As one does.
Yeah. And big sticks. But what was amazing is we're walking through these valleys, and there was a massive he-goat at the front of the herd. And this goat was huge. I mean, it stood like to my shoulder.
Oh,
big,
wow.
big goat. It was huge.
Jeez. Yeah.
And all the shepherds did is they focused on whacking that big goat wherever they wanted it to go. And everybody else came,
followed.
including all the much smaller little lambs and everything. So even within the sort of the framework of herds and flocks and stuff, the idea that a little lamb would be in the front makes no sense. No, you want the big, huge goat thing up front. So everything's reversed. They follow the lamb wherever he goes.
And probably look stupid doing it, but that's the whole point.
Yeah. I mean,
that's not the whole point, but you get what I'm saying.
It is counterintuitive to the ways of the earth.
Yes. Yep.
And then we switch metaphors, but an ancient Israelite would still very much understand it. We go from herding flocks to being farmers. They have been redeemed as first fruits.
Right.
And this is, in a farming culture, the very first bit of the harvest would be brought and offered to God to say, God, we give our first and best to you, and we pray that there'd be much more to follow. And so these 144,000 are as first fruits. They are the first of a lot more to come. And it's interesting, no lie has been found in their mouths. And, the dragon is the great deceiver. He's the great lie spinner.
Right.
And so these are people who do not, whose the way they use words is linked up with reality. We've talked about the Psalms a lot. You read through the Psalms, one of the things that bothers David the most is people who lie. People who slander, people whose words are broken.
Mock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole thing. And so these people use words well. So that's the first scene.
Yep.
Are these 144,000, and they're singing this new song, and then we're gonna switch to the next scene.
Okay.
You ready for it? Do you have any last questions or impressions on this?
I don't think so. I think we'll circle back maybe towards the end. Well, let's move forward.
Sweet.
Verse 6.
Okay.
Then I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven, carrying an eternal gospel to announce to those who live on earth, to every nation and tribe and language and people.
Awesome. So this word gospel, pretty sure we've talked about it before.
Yeah.
But in Greek, it's euangelion. But it's, like all things in the New Testament, grounded in the Hebrew scriptures. The Hebrew word is besorah.
Okay.
And
I've never heard that one.
Yeah, it's appears in Isaiah.
Okay.
And it appears in verbal form. There's a little town right outside Jerusalem today called Mevaseret Zion, and the Zion, that's Zion. But listen to the first word, Mevaseret. Do you hear the besorah? Mevaseret.
I don't, truthfully.
That's okay. That's all right. No worries. We'll work on your Hebrew.
I need it.
But the point is, this little town, they've got a great mall, is called the Herald of Zion. It comes from Isaiah when it says, behold how good and how beautiful on the mountains are the feet of those who bring
the
good news to Zion. A Mevaseret Zion.
Okay.
The point is, the good news in question, as it appears in Isaiah, is it is the people of Israel whose national dreams, whose religious dreams, whose sense of covenant, whose sense of God, all of that has been smashed through the judgment God brings upon Israel through the Babylonians and the Assyrians and stuff. It is the good news that era of punishment is over, and God is going to show up. God himself is going to personally return. Remember, Ezekiel in Ezekiel 10 saw the glory leave the temple, and it's like God is literally not with us anymore. No, God is going to return. God is going to bring new order, new flourishing. God is going to judge evil. God is going to save his people. There will be a new temple. There will be a Davidic king on the throne. The priesthood will be pure and not corrupt. Every man's going to sit under his own fig tree in his house, and all this stuff. That is what the gospel, the Besorah, meant to the ancient Israelites. Now, what's interesting is this is a gospel that is told in Greek. It's the gospel that is gospelized to those who live on the earth every nation and tribe and language of people. So it has gone universal, this message, but we have to keep the grounding in what it meant. Christians very often just take this and make it the psychodrama of my soul.
I was about
which
to
is
say,
just like not defensible from an exegetical standpoint.
Yeah, I kind of imagined that what would likely populate the imagination when you're reading the words, carrying an eternal gospel to announce to those who live on the earth. When we talk about the gospel, we pretty quickly go into Jesus died for our sins, then he resurrected, and certainly like that's in view here, but it's very interesting that what comes in verse 7 talks about fear God, give him glory, the time has come for judgment. We're talking about judgment here. And I guess what I'm saying is like, it's easy to just be like, oh, as soon as we hear the words, they're carrying an eternal gospel to announce to those who live on the earth. We're just talking about like the forgiveness of sins, like as a more like granular and particular thing without this broader picture that you just described, or even the biblical story in the background and the hope that the Hebrews had foregrounding it and what the prophets talked about. Do you get what I'm saying?
Oh, totally.
Like none of that is really in our imagination.
Yes.
And so I feel like we kind of cut to the chase a little too fast and almost narrow things so badly that we miss a good chunk of where this is going. Yeah.
And this is a symptom of the modern imagination writ large. Like, for example, modernist art. You go to a modernist art museum and you're just like, it's all sort of abstract and patterns and you know, a lot of people find it really beautiful, and a lot of people from an older generation especially are like, this is crap. You're calling this art? This is like terrible. Jackson Pollock and crap. But I've heard some art critics talk about, why does modern art celebrate the partial, the fragmented, the incoherent, the nonlinear? What is the fascination with that? And in many ways, it has to do with the fact that modernity, Western modernity, late modernity, however you want to talk about it, no longer has agreed upon stories. There are no agreed upon meta narratives. All the sweeping stories have come under vicious critique. And so the artists are left to contemplate our own sense of homelessness, existentially fragmenting. But then, and this is the existentialist turn, is to say, well, what I really should care about then is I should really care about my own soul, my own the quest for authenticity and genuineness and all this stuff. Yeah. But the point is to say, we live in a time that has made it difficult to understand how our story links up to a broader story, because all those broader stories get accused as being violent. And just so, it's not to say that the gospel is not profoundly good news for this person and my own unique brokenness and rebellions, and that Jesus went to the cross for me, that his resurrection impacts this man's life. That is all so very true. But it is a pixel. Right. It can't be reduced. Massive canvas that actually does cohere and that actually is rooted in Israel's scriptures. And so it's like giving modern art back its storyline. Yeah. And the other thing is when you pluck it out of that larger story, one of the main things you end up doing is depoliticizing the gospel. And so you're not at all concerned with how it might impact the real world, industrial policy, the environment, the way we think about borders, right? Because it's just about me and my soul. The way that we think about education, the way we think about any sort of public policy, economic. Who cares? No, actually, well, it turns out God cares, and it turns out that the Pastoral that Isaiah was announcing was a holistic good news that centered on God and God's presence among his people and the moral rectitude of his people. That is not negotiable. Yeah. But it also is not, it's not reducible to that. Right.
Well, and the installation of the king of the universe requires obedience from the entirety of all creation.
But that's good news. Right. Because our best thinking has got us to where we are. Right. So it's actually great news to be like, oh, someone smarter than us is here. Thank God.
Yeah. Well, okay. So that maybe is directing us, and we'll dig a little bit deeper as we read some more verses, but that's kind of hedging us closer to this idea that there will be people who do not rejoice at the installation of this king.
Correct.
And they will receive their due.
Correct.
So
Correct.
let's keep reading.
Let's get to that. Okay, so I'll read here a chunk.
Please.
Okay, so this first angel speaks with a loud voice, fear God, give him glory. The time has come for his judgment. Worship the one who made heaven and earth and sea and the springs of water. So right again, we're seeing this idea that God's judgment is actually cause for worship and celebration. Back in chapter 11, we got, I think, the Bible's best definition of what judgment is. This is chapter 11, verse 18. It is when God says it is time to destroy the destroyers of the earth.
I love that line.
All those who destroy and deface and warp and make ugly and exploit and do all sorts of evil to the earth. Their time has come, and those destroyers will be destroyed. And that's good news. He was followed by another angel. Now back in chapter 14, this is what it said. Babylon the Great has fallen. She has fallen. She is the one who made all the nations drink the wine of the anger that comes upon her fornication. Now, throughout the Bible, from early Genesis onward, Babylon is the symbol of evil empire. First time we meet Babylon, Genesis 10, we meet a guy named Nimrod. Whose name means rebel, and he's a mighty hunter before the Lord, but his kingdom begins at Babylon. Then in chapter 11, we get the Tower of Babel. It's usually known as the Tower of Babel. In Hebrew, Bavel is how you say Babylon. It's really the Tower of Babylon, yes? This great hubris, we're going to build something into the sky. We're going to make a great name for ourselves. God says, nope.
And hurt people in the process.
So there's that. And then by the time you get to the great prophets, Isaiah and Jeremiah, Babylon is the sort of the distillate of human wickedness. And this whole idea of drinking this wine or this, this evil, those prophets pick up on this hard. So let me read for you Jeremiah 51 says this. It says, Babylon was a golden cup in the Lord's hand, making all the earth drunken. The nations drank of her wine, therefore the nations went mad. And so this is a core biblical idea, and Isaiah develops this deeply, that nations like Assyria and Babylon are simultaneously directed by the Lord to be the Lord's instrument.
Thanks for not avoiding that, because that was a moment where I was like,
totally. No, it's very clear.
Oh, geez.
Directed by the Lord is sending these empires to punish his disobedient people. And yet, Babylon and Assyria and all the rest, they're also morally culpable. And that's a big topic. Isaiah develops it beautifully. In fact, let's just look at Isaiah real quick. Isaiah 51. Thus says your Lord, the Lord, your God, he's speaking to Israel, who pleads the cause of his people. Behold, I have taken from your hand the cup of staggering, the bowl of my wrath, you shall drink no more. I will put it into the hand of your tormentors, and who've said to you, bow down that we may pass over, and have made your back like the ground and like the street for them to pass over. So basically, the cup that God put in Babylon's hand to make Israel and the nations go mad. Well, Babylon, in its own hubris and its own arrogance, God is saying, now I'm going to make you drink that cup, actually. The oppressor is being made to drink that very cup. But this all goes back to a passage, Deuteronomy 32, which is the song at the end of Moses' life. And he tells this story, and the basic rudiments of this story.
Not a hopeful one to start.
These stories are repurposed over and over and over again, which is God found Israel and it was a mess, and God beautified Israel, and but then Israel got fat and kicked and said, who's the Lord? So I raised up a foreign nation to punish you, but then that foreign nation itself got arrogant. So then I punished that foreign nation. And at the end, God vindicates the blood of his servants.
What if that isn't just
the remnant idea?
Yeah.
No, what were you going to say?
No, and if that isn't just a really helpful summary of how this, and I don't know if this is a theological term, but I think it's appropriate here, that recapitulation, that like
Absolutely.
that over and over, that cyclical story that like it happens over and over and over.
Right.
And so I always laugh like when people compare America to like the people of Israel and being the new Israel and that type of thing, because it's like, I just want you to know that based on the scriptures, if that were true, we got something coming.
Right.
Right. And obviously I'm not trying to make fun of anybody right now, but I'm just saying it's kind of funny because we like the good parts of that.
Right.
When we compare ourselves to Israel, but it's like, you maybe didn't read the full story here.
Right. It's like presidents swearing on the Bible. They say, it's like, do you know how many damning things that book has to say about leaders?
Yes.
Like, you should be terrified to bring this book into the orbit of your leadership. Because,
Yeah. And I say that, anyways.
Well, so Destiny, what you're saying about like recapitulation.
Yeah.
This happens over and over.
Yes.
That is exactly what John is claiming, because in speaking of Babylon, he's really speaking of Rome. And he's saying the very same dynamics we saw in Babylon. Oh, and by the way, we saw in the Greeks. And by the way, we saw in the Assyrians and the Persians.
Yep.
Now we're seeing in the Romans. And they have a shelf life. It's not going to last forever. And God reigns beyond that. And so let's get to this is the paragraph that really gets to the question we teed up today.
Yep.
Which is, okay, those who are Babylon or worship Babylon, whatever, is there punishment forever? Here's the relevant verses.
Okay.
They were followed by a third angel who also spoke in a loud voice. If anyone worships the monster, no, not just follows the monster or tolerates the monster, worships the monster, in contrast to verse 7, which says worship God. No, if anyone worships the monster and its image or receives its mark on their forehead or their hand, that person will drink the wine of God's anger, poured neat into the cup of his anger, that is full strength, not diluted with ice or water or whatever. And they will be tortured in fire and sulfur before the holy angels and before the Lamb. The smoke of their torture goes up forever and ever. Those who worship the monster and its image, and those who receive the mark of its name, will have no respite, day or night. So, maybe just make a few comments. There's a dear a dear guy in our church who comes up to me almost every time I preach, and will come up either before or after the sermon and say, just so you know, I believe everyone goes to heaven, and I believe God loves everyone, and everyone's going to heaven. And he goes, I know you disagree with me on that, but I just wanted to tell you again. He tells me like every week. There's a lot of people who maybe rightly hope that everybody goes to heaven. It's a different thing to say, well, I wish something were the case, than to say it is the case. And a lot of people have said, yes, there's a hell. Is it populated? We don't know. Let me outline for you some standard positions. In ancient Judaism, this idea of Gehenna, the Gehinnom Valley, which is outside, it was like the trash heap, but it was just like where you burn the refuse, The question is not, is there punishment for evil? There is. The question is, what's the duration of that punishment? Is it temporary? Is it temporary?
Yeah.
Like if I go burn a pile of trash, it burns for 3 minutes and then it's gone. Yes. Is that what it, so we're kind of annihilated? Or is there eternal conscious torment? Like I'm like, this is the worst thing ever. And by the way, that needs not necessarily be the sort of like, CIA style torture chamber or something like that.
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis's great book, The Great Divorce, talks about how it imagines eternal punishment in terms of eternal loneliness and despair and self-isolation that we've chosen for ourselves. And it's misery, and yet it's a chosen misery. And it does continue on, but we don't necessarily think it like we're in the frying pan and, oil bubbles are coming up. There's different types of torture.
Yes.
Or is there a possible release. And the Catholic idea of purgatory in some sense.
Right.
Now, here's an interesting wrinkle to all this. The New Testament, at several places, including Jesus, I'm going to read in several minutes, talks about that the resurrection will not just be for the good guys, that there will be a resurrection of the unjust. And let me read you a couple statements. So Jesus says in John 5, let me find it here. Jesus says in John 5, "An hour is coming when all who are in the tombs will hear his voice, the voice of the Son of Man, and come out. Those who have done good to the resurrection of life. Those who have done evil to the resurrection of judgment." And Paul in the book of Acts brings this up. He's before Felix at Caesarea. He's in one of his multiple trials. He says, "But this I confess to you, that according to the way, which they call a sect, I worship the God of our fathers, believing everything laid down by the law and written in the prophets, having a hope in God, that there will be a resurrection of both the just and the unjust." Now, where's he getting this? Well, possibly from a book like Daniel, where Daniel says in Daniel 12 verse 2, "Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt." So the Bible seems to teach that it's not just those who are faithful dead in Christ who are going to be raised, but that those who have turned away will also be raised. But then there are unknowns here in terms of timing. Does this all happen simultaneously? Do the unjust dead also receive restored bodies,
right?
Or still broken bodies? And then Revelation chapter 20, at the very end of the book, talks about this scene. It's often called the Great White Throne scene. All the dead are brought. The dead were judged by what was written in the books according to what they had done. The sea gave up the dead who were in it. Death and Hades, like hell, gave up the dead who were in them, and they were judged, each one of them according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. And so maybe is there a resurrection of those are evil, and then there's a second death, and is that more of an annihilation sort of? I don't, the great Jewish sage Maimonides wrote. I'll just kind of summarize. He said, "Look, it is not wise to try to be too specific about what will happen in the age to come. We actually can't know. Doubling down on specific frameworks and timelines and charts doesn't help us love God more or love our neighbor more. It doesn't actually tend to the sorts of thing God wants for us. If God wanted us to know, he'd have told us." I think another aspect here, some Christians, in my experience, get really fixated on this stuff, and they really, really want to know. And often there's a personal backstory. Yeah. My mom died. She never accepted Jesus, and I would like to know what is happening to her soul. And that's a really legit question.
Yep.
And as much as a pastor, as much as I wish I could comfort everybody and just be like, "Hey, you know what? I know your mom totally didn't live a life, et cetera, but she's with God and God loves her and is merciful to her anyways." I actually don't think that's true. Yeah. Does God love her? Yes, but did she love God? Did she choose the conditions that make for unity with God? She did not. But I guess the last thing I'll say here, Destiny, and then I want to hear reflections you have, is that this is an issue to be approached with awe and reverence and prayer and fully understanding the symbolic nature of what we're reading, and not symbolic to say, "Oh, good," because it's not then real.
It's not real. Exactly.
No. Right. It is real. Yeah. Often the reality is even greater than what the symbol is pointing to. So it's not a way to squeak out from under it, but it is a way to say, have caution that you don't read this overly literally. As I was reading it, I was thinking, okay, wait, the smoke of their torture goes up forever and ever.
Okay, so they're being burned. No.
But maybe the smoke is rising forever, but not the torture itself.
Oh, I see.
Because I mean, do I love the idea of people like consciously suffering forever?
Right.
That doesn't make me happy.
Yeah.
But we have to be very careful if we ever get into a position where we see ourselves as more compassionate than God. I'm more moral than God. If God could be a little bit more tolerant like me, the universe would be a better place.
Yep.
Boy, we should be careful if we ever start thinking that way.
I was a sophomore in college, doing a religion and philosophy degree at the time, and then I transitioned to pastoral ministries. But that's relevant because I was in, I think it was like a synoptic gospels class or something like that.
Blaine Charette?
No, not Blaine. David Thomas.
Okay.
One of my dear mentors and favorite teachers. He actually is an expert in Revelation.
Oh.
He did his dissertation on chapter 19.
Oh, wow.
Just a guy who just fears God and loves him deeply. Anyways, somebody raised their hand in class when he was talking through some issues of heaven and hell. And they were kind of indignant.
Mm-hmm.
They were making reference to some political tension at the present time. And they were just like, I just don't see like how God can't have compassion for blank and how he can't understand blank. And in legitimate tears, let me tell you, like in the most holy indignation and just reverence and just tears, he took a second and he responded, if you think for a second that you are more merciful than God, than the living God, I need to ask you to take a moment and step out and think about what you just said. And like you could hear a pin drop in the room. Mm-hmm. I've never felt, well, maybe one other time, I've never felt the weight of the Holy Spirit like that before. It was like the whole room was just whoosh.
Yeah.
And he was, I feel he was very appropriate to have responded that way because it was like, we kind of throw out these accusations like, we come from a society where we pride ourselves in thinking we know what progress means, what's best for human flourishing. And we often turn a blind eye in that process to staring down the barrel of evil.
Yeah, right.
And truly understanding what crushes us as humans. And I think for me, as I read this, oftentimes Christians are so flagrant and like turn or burn, and just very like, guys, we know the right stuff. You're on the wrong side, and be careful. You better turn, follow Jesus so that, you don't go to hell or whatever. But there almost seems to there's almost like this delight, like, we're on the right side. And,
right.
There's no self-reflection in the process. And
right.
I think in also recognizing what this means for those who are wicked and who worship the monster is also should come this deep grief. And then on the other side of that, also a constant reflection of where we stand in our worship.
Yeah.
Not being so quick to assume like, well, I'm on the right side,
right.
But like, where do my priorities lie? Where does my worship lie? And really taking a good hard look at our own life.
Yeah.
And as much as I many times over the course of my life would love to be in the position of the man who comes up to you every Sunday and says, I just want you to know, Ryan, I think we're all going to heaven. It's very strange. I feel as though the suffering and the evil that I've experienced doesn't allow me to get there because it begs for justice. Mm-hmm. It begs for a response.
What's interesting?
Does that make sense? And I just don't know that. Sorry.
Oh, it does.
Finish my thought, though,
please,
I feel like the response sometimes would be like, well, the response was Jesus' atonement. Like, that's why Jesus forgives us all. Like, Jesus died to forgive us all. And I'm like, I don't know that I can like perfectly lay out a systematic theology here. But if God still has to come to restore all of creation, even after Jesus died and resurrected, And he was just kind of the first fruits in that sense. And like the whole thing hasn't like entirely come yet. I think it's fair to say evil hasn't entirely been dealt with yet. And so we can't just say, oh, well, because Jesus died and resurrected, that means everybody gets to go to heaven.
Yeah.
Like there is still evil to be dealt with, and there's still evil within us to be dealt with. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And when we turn away from evil, this is the thing. We don't want God's grace, or we don't want that love, or we don't like. I had this weird experience a couple weeks ago. So man who used to go to our church reached out and said, "Hey, my mom's dying. She's on deathbed. Can you send a pastor to come give her last rites?" So I was the guy. So I like got in the car, drove to San Leandro Kaiser, go into the room, and this woman is like on death. She's got the mask on, and she's comatose. She's on life support. She's going to die.
Okay.
Within 24 hours. And it's comatose. Well, I come into the room. There's a lot of people there. And an old lady sitting beside the bed says, "Can you come here? I'd like to have a word with you." I was like, "Oh, okay." She goes, "What you need to know about this woman dying is that she's a witch. And so please, none of that Jesus Christ mercy stuff, okay?" Like that was my intro to the room. Like we don't want to hear about mercy and grace and all that Jesus crap, okay? She's not into that. And that was first of all, it was a very interesting room to be in.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
I was like, okay, well,
yeah.
It turns out the people in the room were part of her goddess worship circle. And, I in grad school, I taught a class on must have been a third or fourth year doctoral student. I taught a class with Francis Clooney, who's a Catholic comparative theologian, who's an expert in Hinduism.
Oh, wow.
Hinduism and Catholicism. So I taught with him a class called Hindu Goddesses and the Virgin Mary.
Yeah.
So I'm familiar with the traditions of goddess worship and so forth. So we talked about that a little bit. But it was just so interesting, this sort of like out of the gate, don't talk about mercy, okay? We're not interested. And it was like, okay. Back to what you were saying, there is a way to have Christian confidence that is not triumphalistic, that is not vindictive. The two great temptations of Christians in America right now are, on the one hand, sort of a Christian nationalism. Right. On the other hand, a sort of Christian progressivism. And Christian nationalists would tend to veer a little bit more towards the turn or burn, and taking a certain delight in. Yes. I guarantee you, I would guess that in the comments below this podcast, there will be people who comment to try to correct us, to try to say, and the punishment is eternal conscious torment. They may be right. Maybe they are. But the spirit in which it is said, I'm not sure reflects the heart of God. The sort of like, good for, that. But on the other hand, the progressive style of Christianity very much wants to implode Christian metaphysics, implode all metaphysics into, look, it's just verbal word games, and every religion and tradition has their own little semantic game to play, and it all points to the same reality. And all dogs go to heaven when you die, and that is equally unpersuasive to me. And it's just like intellectual junior varsity. It is so... Like, if that's you, read a book, Stephen Prothero, God is Not One, which just points out those who say it all is kind of the same. Yeah. You have not done your homework. These are radically different worldviews, radically different valuations of consciousness, matter, time, being, morality. These things are you can't draw equal. Yeah. Yes. So, anyways, I do think. There is a way to have a bold Christian confidence that is not, that expresses itself through laying down its life, through joining the slaughtered lamb who yet stands. That's the type of life that marks one who's actually understood this, I believe.
And I think, so you and Nathan have talked about this in previous episodes. It tracks with the prophetic tradition. But I think it also tracks here and should be maybe the attitude that we adopt as Christians. We talk about how with the prophets, they eat the message of judgment sweet, and then it's bitter in the stomach.
Right. Yeah.
And it's kind of this idea, much like what we see here. It's like, hey, this is good news. God is going to rid the earth of evil. Like God is on his way.
Right.
That like praise him, worship. We're so glad that the person who knows what they're doing and is good to us is on his way. He's being installed. He's restoring. But there's, the bitterness of that is that when evil is dealt with, there will be some who rejoice in evil such that they will be judged and not restored to God.
Yeah. Correct. I mean,
that brings me like deep grief. I even think about my own children. I was just like stuck for a second and just like, what am I doing to prepare my children to respond in worship to the Lord? And those who I know in my community, like what do I do? I was just thinking, and I was just so moved because I can't convince people to love the Lord. I can't convince people to respond to him properly, but I can't not do nothing, right? And I think the course that I've been, or the opportunities that I've been given is to be a witness. Like the Revelation talks about that all the time. Like the word of our testimony is not just how like we as individuals overcome, but it's how we also invite others to respond properly to God and giving God glory. This is something that professor, Dr. Thomas, also said all the time. The fame of God, giving God glory that he's due, is the salvation. Like it's what leads people to their healing. It's what leads people to ultimate restoration in life. Yeah. And so talk about it. Like
I was telling Sarah the other day, our churches, I get all this business speak mixed up. I don't know if it's our mission or our vision or our purpose, or apparently those are all different. But
core values,
it's something. It's on a wall. But the phrase is loving God, loving people, and the order matters. You can't flip it around to loving people, loving God.
Yeah.
No. And a lot of people want to do that. Well, God, I disagree with him about something. Let's just all love each other. Yeah. It doesn't work that way, actually. Because love wants the good of the beloved, but you have to have a definition of the good. Yeah. And who gets to decide that? In fact, and I think this is, when me and Sarah were talking, on my wedding ring is the statement from Song of Solomon, Anila dildi vidildi li. I am my beloved's, my beloved is mine. And the order there, I think, also matters first. Where we have to say first, I am my beloved's, and they are mine. Not, my beloved is mine, and I'm theirs too.
Yep.
And so, proper ordering of our loves. This is one of St. Augustine's great insights, is the proper ordering of our loves is what it means to love God well, to love the world well. Yep. And so it's the misalignments of our loves that wreak havoc. And this is where, a statement in popular culture like, well, love is love. Well, great. First of all, that's a tautology. Like that tells me nothing. Yeah. But secondly, it's way overly simplified because the truth is we live in a world with a lot of different loves. And the question is, how are those loves going to be coordinated? Yep. And in terms of LGBT stuff, David Bennett has written a book called The War of Loves. Oh, right. And in which he's talking about, like, I'm trying to figure out how to align these different loves that are hard, So organizing our loves with the help of the Holy Spirit, it's not easy, but it is mandatory, actually. And this is where, and this gets out of the realm of sort of like abstract theology, symbolism, and gets into the realm of pastoral encouragement. And remember, John, who's writing the book of Revelation, he's a pastor. There are real people reading this. Yep. And so I love, he comes out of this, he's talking about, man, this is like deep stuff. And then I love where he lands this scene. He goes, this demands patience, bearing up from God's holy people who keep God's commands and the faith of Jesus. Then I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, write this, God's blessing on the dead, who from this time onward die in the Lord. Yes, says the Spirit, so that they may rest from their works, for the deeds they have done follow after them. And I just love that pastoral note of like, hang in there. God has blessing for you. God is going to give you good rest after this great struggle. There's just, I feel like he's like speaking to the heart here, which is so necessary. As part of, for me, this was a huge part of my theological formation at Northwest, when it was really impressed upon me, and I really took this seriously, that you cannot be a theologian, you cannot be a Bible scholar if you are not also worshiping, if you are not also trying to,
if your loves are not properly
throwing your
ordered.
whole life into this. Yeah, exactly. But that is hard. And so you need you need encouragement. And I love the note of encouragement.
A quick note, I want to make sure we're clear here too. This is not like an undoing of like salvation by faith. Like, especially whenever we hear words about works and deeds and they will follow you and blah, 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 we're like, oh, gotta earn it. Not what it's saying. What I think you did a great job of describing what he's trying to convey here, which is that like your faithfulness, right? Faith begets faithfulness, right? So your faithfulness to the Lord, what you've done, your deeds, your works, that's absolutely true, will follow you. Like they're not for nothing. Like your faithfulness has been demonstrated. God will give you rest. And that is
I yearn for that.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, I want to take like a nice long break.
Well, I think we're also a little bit weighted towards that, considering we have young children.
Oh gosh, yeah, exactly.
We're all kind of in the relentless, like toddler baby stage right now. So, you know, for sure. But on a real sense too, I think just like the anguish of the soul, as it longs for God's rest when there's just so much unrest in the world, I think makes a lot of sense. So bring us home.
Yep.
What are some last thoughts, and what verse are we looking at?
So the next verse begins, "Then I looked," which is John's way of signaling new scene. And in the final scene of chapter 14, maybe I'll just paraphrase it for purpose of time.
Sure.
He gives us a great image that would have been well known from that world of harvest time.
Okay.
Which is, these are agrarian communities living by the rhythms of the earth. And a highlight of the the year was always when, man, all that planting season and all that tilling and that fertilizing and that protecting our crop has finally come home, and we are harvesting. There's harvest festivals in almost every culture around the world, and the ancient Israelites included. It's a scene of joy.
Yeah.
And yet here we have two types of harvest. We have a grain harvest, and that seems to be a grain harvest of God's people. Like Jesus himself in John chapter 4 says, look, the fields are they're white for harvest. Send out workers into the harvest. You know that idea?
Yep.
So it's this harvest of those who are faithful that is set alongside the grape harvest, which seems to be the sort of like harvest of human evil. And there's a crushing of the grapes, and the grape juice is likened to blood. Right. And
that like doesn't like fill up super high.
Oh yeah, like what does it say?
Goes on
a horse's
forever.
bridle for 200 miles. Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. Now, but again, all of this is based in the Old Testament. Have a look at Joel chapter 3, where there's a sickle in the hand, and and the harvest is an act of God's judgment, but that's also good news. Have a look at Isaiah 63, where there's this idea of the grape harvest and treading the wine press. John Steinbeck's great California novel, The Grapes of Wrath, pulls on this imagery. It's a fantastic book. But to this whole idea of, blood everywhere and it's super gory and all this stuff, we cannot forget the refrain of this book, which is that Jesus has overcome by his blood and by the word of his. So whose blood is it? Is it God, AK-47 Jesus just mowing down the opposition?
Yeah.
There is a dimension of God's blunt justice destroying the destroyers of the earth. That's a real thing. But we also have to remember that it is his own blood this is very interesting. It says that this winepress is trodden outside the city. This is verse 20.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
That phrase,
yes, I was going to ask
outside
about
the
that.
city,
Yeah.
for early Christians, seemed to point to Jesus being killed outside the city gates. He's exiled from the holy city. Hebrews chapter 13, verses 11 through 14 talks about this. The first martyr, Stephen,
So is this an inversion then? Because if this is talking about wrath on those who are kind of rejecting God, it's almost like an inversion where they're now outside the city gates.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and that points towards the end of the book, right? Where outside the New Jerusalem will be all the evil.
Right.
But this points to the idea, on the cross of Jesus, these two things, God's judgment and God's mercy, both of those things come to bear in a profound way. Now, one of the amazing things is the resurrection of Jesus in many ways is like God overruling the court. The human court in Jerusalem said he is a false Messiah, therefore we will kill him. But it's like, in the United States, we have an appellate court system. You appeal to a higher court, all the way up to the Supreme Court. The case of Jesus was taken to the appellate court in heaven, and it overturned the lower court's rulings and said, no, not only he's not a false Messiah, he's the real Messiah. He will be raised up. And that act of judgment, Jesus went through the suffering. His blood was crushed like the grapes. And yet God said, that is the mark of the true Israelite, the true human. And in fact, that is what I look like when I show up in the world. All of that is an act of judgment, justice. It is a judicial decision that for the early Christians was causing people to come and worship God, bringing people from every tribe and nation and tongue to say, this is the good news that we've been waiting for. And so this symphony of symbols, deeply based in the Old Testament, you could start to see, we were talking some time ago about modernist art, how it's lost the plot.
Yep.
The question is, would we rather live in a plotless world or in a world that has a very thin pseudo-Christian plot? I'd almost rather live in a plotless world.
Yep.
Because oftentimes when we try to bring the Christian story back in, it totally kills all of these layers and the point counterpoint and it kills all the mystery.
Yep.
And so it's very important that we sufficiently sit with these symbols and then we square up to the choice that this is presenting us with, which is, am I in my life, my family, my community, my church, my city, are we choosing to back Babylon and we will suffer the fate of Babylon, or are we choosing to follow and worship the slaughtered yet living Lamb and to have his victory in his way, in his time? So it really does confront you ultimately with a choice over what kind of life you're going to live. And in a standard apocalyptic challenge, there's not a lot of ambiguity here.
And I appreciate, especially for how we typically have this conversation, especially about hell. I just want to point this out because what I don't want you guys to think is that we are baiting you. We spent a great deal of time talking about the response. And I think that was appropriate because much like the quote that you read, it's not so much about the particularities, even though, of course, it scratches the itch of curiosity. How is this all going to go down? What, is hell an eternal, conscious situation, or is it, momentary and then we disappear and don't exist anymore? We may not be answering those questions with certainty directly, but I think the appropriate shift that we've made here during this episode is to say what we want to focus on is the spirit of our response to Jesus. And once you focus on that, and once your heart posture is appropriately reoriented and our loves are reoriented, there is space for conversation about that, but we don't have to be in as much of a space of, oh no, well, what's this particular answer? Because we understand baseline that what God is being very clear about, like you just said, is here's how I want the world to respond to me. Yeah. And those that don't will face consequences.
Yes. And the Bible's clear about that.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying.
Is there post-mortem punishment and consequence for those who've turned against God? Unambiguously.
Yep.
So that's the baseline. There's certainty about that.
Yep.
the question is, the question is, what does that look like in terms of time? And maybe there's variety even.
And those are important questions. But what I'm getting at is that I think it was also appropriate. We weren't trying to bait anybody, but that we're appropriately trying to reorient you to the better question behind the question.
Right.
And I hope, and my prayer is that you're not just clicking through podcasts or YouTube and you leave this episode like, oh, that was a nice episode. That really touched me. I want to ask the question, how are you going to respond to the Lord? Because it's fun. It's awesome to dig into the word. But I pray that God is stirring you to take a good look and to respond, hopefully in worship, because he is so worthy of that. And we invite you to continue on this journey with us through Revelation, but also take this moment to respond to the Lord. Good word.
Let's land the plane there then. So thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed this.
Yeah.
And we're the Deeper Bible Podcast, and we will see you next time. Shalom, homies. Take care.